Hey everybody, Questwise here, and today is going to be part one of a two-part series about superhero role-playing games. I'm going to do a brief sort of overview of several games today, and then next week I'm going to do a couple of more, and then I'll kind of give you my synopsis of which ones are my favorite. Um, it's going to be completely my personal opinion because there's lots of different ways to play superhero role-playing games. This is the way that I prefer. So all of these things that I talk about through these couple of videos are going to be purely my opinion on how I like to run superhero role-playing games. But first, let's look at a couple of games and I'll give you a little synopsis of each one of them, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how I perceive role-playing games that emulate superheroes. I like to run how I like to run them at my tables and stuff. So first off, I want to talk about the Authority role-playing game. Now, this was just recently gifted to me by a good friend of mine, and I wanted to. I quickly read through most of this. I had read a little bit of the Authority comic before, and I was pretty impressed, but it had been quite a while since I read it. What's great about this is that this is a role-playing game and a resource book for the Authority, for the Authority comics. So the first good portion of this, maybe a quarter of this, is background into each of the characters. It's a look into the world of the Authority. It goes through the first 12, I believe, issues of the comic and discusses the plot lines and what happens and all that kind of stuff. This is a dual system role-playing game in that you can run it D20 style, or you can do the tri-stat system. This is by Guardians of Order. I don't even know if Guardians of Order is actually in business anymore. It's been a long time since I've seen anything from them, but they, if I remember right, were really responsible for Big Eyes, Small Mouth role-playing game and several others. And actually, we're going to talk about another product of theirs after we talk about this one. This was my first foray into the tri-stat system, and it's interesting. It kind of reminds me a bit of Mutants and Masterminds in the sort of character generation aspect of the game. This particular book is very closely tied to. I mean, I guess not so much. It is specifically an Authority comic type of a game, but it gives you the flexibility to make characters of any kind of stripe or type. The thing is that it's meant to be a little bit grittier, a little bit sort of on the darker side, I guess, which I dig. That's fine. That's cool. But I'm no sure I was completely sold on the tri-stat system. I guess maybe I would have to play it a few more times in order to sort of get the real good feel for it. One of the things and I'll talk about this later. That's a point for a different time. This was really great though. The production quality of this is good. If you can still get a copy of this, very, very well done. I enjoyed reading it very much, and I really appreciated it being gifted to me. This was definitely hold a very nice spot on my bookshelf, and whether or not I even run it for the tri-stat system, I might even use a lot of the information for maybe a D20 type game. So, the Authority, number one. Number two, I told you we talked about another Guardians of Order product. That is the Silver Age Sentinel Stingy Gamer Edition. I picked this up at a local store that doesn't exist anymore. It's a Stingy Gamer Edition. I think was $10 for this. This is a Guardians of Order game production, but it is a D20 version. There's no tri-stat system in this at all. What this tries to emulate, and this is a very small book. It only clocks in at maybe 150 pages or so. What this book tries to emulate is Silver Age comics, the older type of a style of comics. Not quite Golden Age, but the next level up. And does a very, very good job of it. The structure style is very much like the tri-stat system, very much like the Authority, and as far as like building your character and as far as like creating powers for your characters and stuff. But this is very much meant to be Silver Age, and has a great essay, great treatise in here on Silver Age comics and what that means to play in a Silver Age sort of structure. So that's a good one. That one's been in my collection for a long time. And I use it a lot of times as a resource when I'm trying to do some kind of emulate the sort of Silver Age kind of thing. Next up is, I haven't been following Mutants Masterminds very closely, but this is the version that I own. I believe this is the fourth edition. This is the only book I own for it, and this is core book number 1. But this is from Green Ronin Publishing. I know that this has a huge following. I know that there are many, many devotees of Mutants and Masterminds out there. I just didn't like it. It's not my favorite. I'll just put it that way. It's not a bad game in any sense of the word. It works just fine. I just found that there were parts of it that were too difficult. They were just too crunchy for me for a superhero game. And for some people, that's great. Some people really love that kind of stuff. For me, it just kind of missed the mark for me. And I'll discuss after we get done showing these books what that mark exactly is. Next up is Vigilante City by Bloat Games. I had a part in designing this. So just out of the, get that out of the way, clear the air. I did have a part in designing parts of this game for Bloat Games. I believe I designed the psychic class from the ground up, and a few other parts that I wrote here and there. I can't remember if I wrote an adventure for this or not. Possibly. Anyhow, Vigilante City, this is an OSR-based thing. This is part of the Survive This line from Bloat Games. So if you've played Survive the Zombies or Survive This Dark Places and Demogorgons, you'll be very familiar with how this works. It's a D20 OSR emulator, but set in a modern-day superhero world, and this lets you do a lot of things. This took a lot of influences from a lot of different things, Mutants and Masterminds, and a few games that we're going to talk about coming up and stuff. This is a great game. There's a lot of stuff available for it now. Books 1 through 4 are now out. I think you can buy 3 and 4. I'm not sure if they're in POD format or not, but I know that they're out there in PDF form. But this game is good. I really, really enjoy playing this game. I really enjoy running this game because it hits on things that are really key to me for a superhero role-playing kind of thing. So a little history behind this as well, too. This was born out of another previous game. It was one of the early games that Bloat Games had done, and it became Vigilante City. They used to emulate the rules for this. So the game originally, and this is kind of how it's broken down onto this book, is that you can play. You're playing street level superheroes, things like Batman and Robin, or Daredevil, Punisher, that kind of stuff. This game expands upon it a little bit in an extra section, so more maybe advanced section. It goes into things like psionics and magic and mutants and all sorts of crazy superpowers as well too. So definitely worth picking this one up if you haven't already. Great stuff. And lastly, for today, for part 1, I want to talk about Heroes Unlimited from Palladium Books. Here's where I want to talk a little bit about how I enjoy running superhero games. And the reason I left this one for last is because I would say this and Vigilante City really nail what it is for me to run a superhero type of a role-playing game. What that means to me is that the character creation should be simple, it should be fast, but it should be dynamic. The games, I believe, when I try to emulate things, my favorite comic period of all time would be Marvel in the 90s, right? We're talking over-the-top, crazy action, stuff that didn't really make sense sometimes. Sometimes it was in outer space. Sometimes it was just like crazy mashups of different characters from different timelines and stuff. That's my favorite era to emulate when I play superhero role-playing games. Thus, for me, I think character creation should not be crunchy. It should be fairly simple. I'm not a fan of when you have to build the powers. Now, I get why that's interesting to some people. So, for instance, in Mutants and Masterminds, if you want to have a character like Doctor Strange that can use magic, the section on creating that ability is so crunchy. It's so much a work on the player's part of being like, okay, if you want to do this, you need to emulate this power, and if you want to do this, you have to sort of make this power, but then plug this thing in here. It's way too much for me, for the players, I think, on their end. What I really like about Survive This Vigilante City and Heroes Unlimited is that they have those classes available. If you want to play a magic user, here's the bonuses you get for playing a magic user. Here's your list of spells. Pick so many of them. Go. Like, that's what I really, really want. I want the game to be more focused upon that crazy action 90s awesomeness, right? that the character creation sort of gets out of the way. I really appreciate that from Heroes Unlimited. I love that I can take this book and no matter basically any hero that I want to create from that time period or around surrounding time periods, I can create with this game. But it's not a lot of like, okay, you know, build this to make this to build this kind of thing. Now, one of the drawbacks that some people say, I've never found this as a drawback. Some people say that the organization of these books is horrible. In fact, I think this is probably one of the better ones out there that works really well. Some people say that the combat system is too complicated. I don't find that to be the thing. I think what it is it's just different enough that it throws people off. While it feels very D20, it is distinctly different from a D20 system, and thus it can kind of rattles some people. This is one of the games that I started with. This is Heroes Unlimited and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. These are the games I started with. So for me, they seemed natural. They seem, actually, in fact, going to a D20 game like D&D was tough for me because I was so used to this kind of an idea. So it's a little bit maybe reversed for some other people. But I really like the super fast action, and I want just like tons of damage, and I want, you know, crazy, your heroes to be able to take crazy amounts of hits and do heroic things, but not be bogged down in creating a character for a couple of hours. And I think that Survive This Vigilante City and Heroes Unlimited does that very, very well. Now, not to say that the other games are bad, because they're not. All the other games are great, and I use a lot of those other games for reference for types of things that I want to put into my Survive This Vigilante City or Heroes Unlimited games. But the systems behind them are not my favorite. And I've borrowed some stuff from those systems for my games, but again, more of a resource source books for those for me. Again, like I said, Authority, I probably will need to play a couple more games to see if the tri-stat system is something that I'm really going to enjoy. It's going to push it over the top above Heroes Unlimited or Vigilante City. But I will definitely use that as a resource book. There's some great stuff in there. The Silver Age Sentinels thing. Awesome stuff. I love to do this kind of like cross timeline stuff. That was huge in the 90s, like different timelines and planes of existence and worlds and crazy stuff. So to have some stuff like Silver Age Sentinels that has a great resource in there, some great background on what it is to be Silver Age gaming, it's great because I love to take heroes from modern day and throw them into a Silver Age setting and then vice versa kind of thing. That Captain America idea, right? That he's 1940s and all of a sudden he sort of wakes up in the present day and he's trying to adjust to those kind of things. That's the kind of stuff I really like, and I'll use those as resource books. But so part 1 of 2, next week we're going to look at things like some classic games, some more classic games like Marvel Superheroes. We're going to talk about Margaret Weis Productions. She had a Marvel game as well too, and the name of it is completely blanking on me right now. But we'll talk about that structure a little bit, because that game has one of my all-time favorite initiative systems in it ever. And we'll also be talking about Tiny Supers from Gallant Knight Games as well too. So until next time, I'm Questwise, and I am out. Hey there, fellow questing knights. If you're looking to collect vintage RPGs or would like to start and you don't know where to go, or if you're looking for a supplement to fill in that hole in your collection, I highly recommend Wayne's Books. Yeah, that's right. Wayne's Books, since 2002, have sold thousands of vintage RPGs. I highly recommend them. I've used them in the past, and I have nothing but 100% satisfaction with their service. So if you get a chance, swing on over to Wayne's Books and pick up everything you'll need vintage RPG-wise. I'm Questwise, and until next time, I am out.